Chapter 5. Comedy is, as we have said, an imitation of characters of a lower type, not, however, in the full sense of the word bad, the ludicrous being merely a subdivision of the ugly. It consists in some defect or ugliness which is not painful or destructive. To take an obvious example, the comic mask is ugly and distorted, but does not imply pain. The successive changes through which tragedy passed, and the authors of these changes are well known, whereas comedy has had no history because it was not at first treated seriously. It was late before the archon granted a comic chorus to a poet. The performers were till then voluntary. Comedy had already taken definite shape when comic poets, distinctively so called, are heard of. Who furnished it with masks or prologues, or increased the number of actors, these and other similar details remain unknown. As for the plot, it came originally from Sicily, but of Athenian writers Crates was the first who, abandoning the iambic or lampooning form, generalized his themes and plots. Epic poetry agrees with tragedy insofar as it is an imitation in verse of characters of a higher type. They differ in that epic poetry admits but one kind of meter and is narrative in form. They differ, again, in their length, for tragedy endeavors, as far as possible, to confine itself to a single revolution of the sun, or but slightly to exceed this limit, whereas the epic action has no limits of time. This, then, is a second point of difference, though at first the same freedom was admitted in tragedy as in epic poetry. Of their constituent parts some are common to both, some peculiar to tragedy. Whoever, therefore, knows what is good or bad tragedy, knows also about epic poetry. All the elements of an epic poem are found in tragedy, but the elements of a tragedy are not all found in the epic poem.
Summary and reflection of Chapter 5.
In Section 5 of the Poetics, Aristotle the nature of comedy, defining it as an imitation of characters of a lower type. However, he clarifies that this lower type does not necessarily mean inherently bad. Rather, it encompasses the ludicrous, which is a subdivision of the ugly. It would be interesting to hear Aristotle's commentary on the nature of comedy today, where in many comedic stand-up routines the humor lies in truth-telling. Comedy, according to Aristotle, involves the representation of defects or ugliness that are not painful or destructive. An illustrative example is the comic mask, ugly and distorted, yet not implying pain. While tragedy underwent well-documented changes with known authors, comedy lacked a serious treatment initially. The archon's grant of a comic chorus marked a turning point, but the details of comedy's evolution, such as the introduction of masks, prologues, and an increased number of actors, remain unknown. Crates, among Athenian writers, is credited as the first to generalize themes and plots, moving away from the lampooning form. Aristotle then draws a comparison between epic poetry and tragedy. Both are imitations in verse of characters of a higher type, but they differ in the choice of meter and narrative form. Epic poetry employs a single kind of meter and is narrative, while tragedy endeavors to confine itself to a limited time frame, usually a single revolution of the sun. This temporal limitation is a significant difference, as epic actions have no such bounds. The constituent parts of tragedy and epic poetry share commonalities, but some elements are unique to each. Understanding what makes good or bad tragedy, therefore, provides insights into epic poetry. While all elements of an epic poem can be found in tragedy, the reverse is not true, as not all elements of a tragedy are present in an epic poem.
Practical exercises.
Writers. Ludicrous character creation. Write a short comedic piece that involves characters with defects or ugliness that are not painful or destructive, embracing the ludicrous as defined by Aristotle. Generalization in plot. Craft a comedic plot that generalizes themes and situations, moving away from specific lampooning to explore broader comedic themes. Composers. Comic musical expression. Compose a musical piece that captures the essence of comedy, using musical elements to convey defects or ugliness in a playful and non-destructive manner. Evolving themes composition. Create a composition that mirrors the evolution of comedic themes from lampooning to a more generalized and expansive form, inspired by Crates' approach. Dancers. Ludicrous movement exploration. Choreograph a dance that embodies the ludicrous, using expressive movements to convey defects or ugliness in a humorous and non-painful way. Generalized comedy dance. Explore dance movements that represent generalized comedic themes, moving beyond specific lampooning to convey broader humor in your choreography. Actors. Character portrayal in comedy. Engage in improvisational exercises where characters with defects or ugliness are portrayed in a comedic light, focusing on the ludicrous without causing pain. Transition from lampooning to generalization. Perform scenes that showcase the evolution of comedic themes, transitioning from lampooning to a more generalized and expansive form, inspired by the approach of Crates. These exercises encourage artists to engage with the essence of comedy as outlined by Aristotle, exploring the ludicrous, generalizing comedic themes, and understanding the unique elements that distinguish comedy from other forms of poetry.